Welcome back, everybody. Today's flight's going to be a little bit different than what I've been posting to date. On some of the previous flights, we've discussed the availability of the Cirrus SR20 and SR22 from TorqueSim. Very realistic flight models, training models for Xplane 11.5. So today we're going to do a flight in the newest release, which is the SR20. Um, Short flight from Block Island to Nantucket, and our waypoint today will just be Martha's Vineyard. And although this will be an IFR flight at 3,500 feet, uh, just so we can show the G1000 capabilities in the TorqueSim model, we will shoot the ILS 6 approach at 061 degrees and set our nav1 radio to 109.1 for the true ILS approach experience. No VATSIM, no air traffic control today. We will be using Active Sky XP. Our flight plan has been preloaded, so you don't have to watch me do that. Briefing shows a little bit of a crosswind. Once we get everything started up inside the cockpit, we'll come back. We'll confirm our altimeter setting is still 3031. So let's take a quick peek at the aircraft from the outside. TorqueSim has done a great job with this aircraft. Full tie down. Um, and there's a couple different ways you can remove these items from within the cockpit menu system from TorqueSim, or through a virtual walk around the aircraft. Removal of the pitot tube cover, tie down canopy cover, chocks, etc. can all be done while you're doing your aircraft walk around. Um, let's jump inside. Menu system for the aircraft is on the left hand side of your screen. If you just hover in the area, it's going to show you your frame rate, which is a nice little feature. Um, Obviously, we're sitting at about 50 frames per second on the ground. Um, if we go to the aircraft menu, you'll see your ground equipment can be turned on and turned off from the menu system. I leave persistent systems enabled. That leaves your aircraft in the same condition it was when you exited the simulator. Uh, it's a nice feature to have if you shut down the aircraft and put it in a configuration that you don't have to be confused at where you left off. Um, but if you like it to reset, just turn this off and it will be reset uh, so that you don't have to go through that hassle. We have a maintenance tab here. We can do all systems inspections, oil change, engine overhaul, etc. right from this menu. Load manager for weight and balance is available from the menu system. You can even adjust this on the fly if you'd like. Um, I don't typically do that. Today we'll start off with a full tank of gas in both left wing and right wing. The last tab is a livery generator, which gives you the ability to change your tail number, which is a feature not available in the default Xplane aircraft and liveries. Let's shut that menu system off. Quick tour of the cockpit. Very realistic cockpit. We have a center console, opens and close. We'll be able to get rid of our cockpit noise by plugging in our headphones once we get started. In this aircraft, you will have to manually change fuel tanks to keep your fuel balance appropriately. You will be alerted if you drift out of balance because of the lack of use of the fuel pump to manage. I'm sorry, the fuel selector switch to manage your fuel flow. Um, and a couple of other items that are very realistic is the rocket deployed parachute system, which is fully functional in Xplane 11.5. Most of what I'm describing to you is not available in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 at this time. Hopefully, the realism will get there but as you've heard me on other videos, I just see Flight Simulator 2020 today as more of a game for the masses than a true flight simulator. Although, if previous versions of Microsoft Flight Simulator um, are the example, we will get there. It's just not ready yet. So for now, I am an Xplane 11.5 pilot and dabble in Flight Simulator 2020 when new updates come out to see what's changed. What we'll do is we will remove the cover. To the parachute system, we will remove the key. If I had passengers on board, I would put that cover back on. So inadvertently, somebody does not deploy the parachute, and I believe that's what Cirrus recommends, or at least leave it in a condition that shows that you removed the key, but the cover's still there. Gives everybody a heads up. Don't touch this. I'm flying alone today. I'll leave it off. Let's get the aircraft ready for startup. Make sure mixture's full, which it is. Throttle's back. We're going to power on our battery. Prime the engine. Put the fuel pump on. Keys in the ignition. You can take the key out. We'll put it back in. Now this is very true to startup, so you want to make sure that you've got your throttle cracked just a little bit. Must be a cold day today. Fuel pump's on, throttle's cracked. And there we go. And if we leave the throttle at about 1200 RPM, I'm going to show you something. Let's get our avionics, alternators on, lights on, pitot 2 on. So some things that definitely simulate. If I bring my RPM down to about 1,000, you're going to get an alternator error or warning. There we go. That's perfectly okay. You can leave this RPM at 1,000, but you'll find that when you get it up over 1150 to 1200, there you go. That's going to disappear. I'm still going to throttle back to 1,000 RPM. Okay. Menu system on the G1000 is just perfect. We get our classic Know Your Limits menu from Cirrus. There's a nice little function that allows us to adjust fuel. So if you forgot before you set the flight up in Xplane 11, at this point, instead of going into the menu system and making those adjustments, you can fill the tanks right from here. And then you just accept the fuel quantity, and we have our engine management system up. Another nice little feature is our ability to put the headset on and muffle the cabin noise. So if we click on our earplug, there you go, engine noise is at a minimum. For now, I'll leave that disconnected until we get into the air. Okay, while we let the engine warm up, and you will need to let your engine warm up in the TorqueSim model or you will struggle to take off. I'm going to just lean the engine out a little bit so we don't foul the plugs. And let's configure the aircraft for our flight. Bring up the G1000 system. Leave the engine area. Make sure we've got our flight plan preloaded, which in this case we do, but if you forgot, all you have to do is go into the flight plan, We could delete the flight plan from here, and you could load your preloaded or pre-configured flight plan right from the G1000. For our approach and landing, what we're going to do is an ILS approach, and once we get up in the air, I'll set that up with you on the G1000. Okay, next thing I want to make sure we're at 3,500 feet on the altitude so that when we take off, that's preset. Do a quick look at active sky, confirm that our altimeter is still there we go, 3031. Minor adjustment. 3031, about 120 feet. The backup instruments do not configure with the G1000, so you may want to adjust this. It's already pre-adjusted in my case, but when I adjust manually my backup instruments, it does not adjust on the G1000 and vice versa. Okay, so one of the other interesting things about the Cirrus SR20 as well as the SR22 is you are not going to steer this aircraft with your rudder pedals on the ground. You are going to use differential braking, which is true life. The front gear on a Cirrus SR20 or SR22 does not turn with the rudder pedals. So you use your left and right landing gear braking system to make those turns. One of the things I recommend is if you're going to use this aircraft religiously, or if you're training in an SR20 or an SR22 in the real world, that you configure your simulator's rudder pedals so they're not very sensitive. In my case, I have not configured them to be as precise because I do like to jump between the SR20, SR22, and the Vision Jet. And the Vision Jet does steer with your rudder pedal steering and not differential braking. In the real world, that becomes a problem. It's a little different to learn. You have to be careful not to just turn and lean on those brakes. You'll overheat and burn through brakes very quickly. Okay, so what we're going to do is taxi to our runway. And in the case of Block Island, there's not a lot of taxiway, so we can either jump onto the taxiway here and onto the runway, go down on the runway and turn around, or there's a little bit of a taxi area here, so that's I think what we'll do, so we don't have to run the whole length of the runway. Global traffic shows nothing in the area, so we are cleared to taxi, not be concerned about incoming aircraft at this time. So, parking brake off. Give you a little better vantage point of the taxi. Off the pedals. Throttle up just a little bit. Now, with the differential braking system on the Cirrus aircraft, when we're going really slow at low RPM, you are going to rely 100% on differential braking. As we throttle up and get a little bit more speed, the rudder pedals, while mushy, will also assist in your steering, just because of the forward momentum of the aircraft. You can see some aircraft on the tarmac here. That's global traffic aircraft. Again, not using ATC. We're not on VATSIM today. This is just a quick flight VFR to show you the SR20 from TorqueSim. And I think what we'll also do is eventually get into Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I will point out where the difference in realism is between the two simulators. Is Microsoft Flight Simulator prettier? Probably. But everything I need in Xplane 11 for a very realistic flight is here. As you can see, I'm tapping the brakes, straightening out the aircraft. I don't mind the jerkiness because, again, it's differential braking. I've been doing so much flying in the Vision Jet that I've a little bit lost my touch on the SR20, but it comes back quickly. I did have to practice quite a bit, just taxiing around airport taxiways in order to get comfortable with the differential braking. I recommend you do the same. And quite honestly, I'm not at all disappointed in the scenery at Xplane. It does cost a lot more money if you want to set up some of the scenery that I have here. I have Orbix Terraflora, which puts all the tree realism in, and some of the key airports that I like to fly into, Nantucket being one of them. So that will be an Orbix overlaid airport in Xplane 11. Alright, so now we're going to do a harder brake on the left rudder pedal to turn ourselves around, throttle up just a little bit, come back down. Close enough. Let's get our first flaps in for takeoff. Quick system check. We will not do a run up. Don't want to waste your time doing a run up. Mixture to full. Fuel pumps on. Go into the other fuel tank, just out of habit. We confirmed we taxied. Many people will recommend that you start your engine on one fuel tank, taxi with another, make sure that you don't have problems with fuel pump or clogged fuel line. In the real world, that's certainly good advice. In the simulator, unless you're training for real world, it's not as important. Okay, flaps are down, altimeter is set, and we're going to have a little bit of a crosswind takeoff based on what I see on active sky, so get a little fun. Let's straighten out the aircraft. Little brake. Once we get some momentum, I get off the differential braking. At this point, I'm on rudder pedals. Bigger adjustments. They get smaller as we pick up speed. Rotation about 75, 80 knots. And we're up. Feel that wind kick right away. I'm going to start trimming out the plane a little bit. Soon as I get a decent climb to about 80 knots, pull up the flaps, start trimming out the plane. Good. You can hear the wind from XP Realistic in the background. We can start configuring our autopilot, go to nav, set our vertical speed. We're going to drop that down to about 800 feet per minute to start, and we'll intersect our first waypoint. Very gusty Block Island today. Looking at a 13 knot wind, which is going to end up to be a crosswind on landing. Keeping the throttle at full for now. I don't make too many throttle adjustments until I hit my climb altitude, and then we'll start talking about the engine management here, because this aircraft allows for fuel flow adjustments when you reach cruise, so that you can manage your fuel utilization and wear and tear on the engine. Certainly don't want to go full throttle, full fuel throughout your flight. Going back to Microsoft Flight Simulator experience, not much there. So when you start to lean out the engine, it goes from full lean, as you scroll back to engine stalling, and you have to be very light on the mixture, and you will not get the engine performance that you will out of the TorqueSim model. So we're at 2,500 feet. I want to set this, make sure we're at 35. We're good. So we'll climb out to 3,500 feet, and then we'll start playing with the engine adjustments. Take a peek at our G1000, and you'll see our waypoints with assigned altitudes are set up in visual. You don't see that in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. This is a really well-tuned G1000 system for TorqueSim and Xplane 11.5. About at 3,500 feet, we're going to let our throttle climb up. Our airspeed climb up a little bit. We are confirmed we are hitting our waypoints appropriately. Now let's just take a peek at the engine system as we pick up our airspeed. So if I can, I will bring up something I screen grabbed from the SR20 manual, and after reading through the manual, what you want to do is always adjust your RPM and then your fuel flow. So when we bring up our G1000, we're going to go back into the engine system. I'm going to bring the throttle back to 85%. RPM first. A little OCD when I do this, but that's about where we want to be. And now we're going to, based on the chart, lean our engine to a fuel flow at 11.1 gallons per hour. So this is on the top end of cruise with 85% of the engine power, and that fuel flow is 11.1. But that's because I'm not worried in Xplane about my fuel consumption as you might be in the real world. Go back to navigation here. As you can see, on course to Martha's Vineyard, where we will activate somewhere where we cross over Martha's Vineyard land. We'll activate our approach such that we'll turn for the ILS approach on runway 6. We can configure that now by going into the procedures page. Let's select our approach. We want to go through the menu system, ILS runway 6, enter. We are going to use Martha's Vineyard VOR as our waypoint. We're going to use minimums of 500 feet. This is fully adjustable in Xplane, so you can go off of the charts. And for now, we will load it. Don't activate it, just load it. This way, when we go back and we're ready to activate, all we need to do is scroll up to activate approach, hit enter, and what we've got in as our approach will load appropriately. So let's take a quick peek at some of the other functions of this aircraft. We're gonna plug in our headset. Notice the cabin noise greatly reduces when we do that. Makes it really nice for doing a VATSIM flight or even a YouTube video. But when we start to bring our approach in, I like to unplug that so that you get the expression of the engine RPM as we descend and come in on final approach. So at this point, just enjoy the flight. I'm going to go quiet a little bit and come back on the air as soon as we are ready to activate our approach into Martha's Vineyard. Okay, we're starting to approach Martha's Vineyard VOR. Let's just take a look and see how our flight is currently configured. Um, Martha's Vineyard altimeter should be 3028 versus at takeoff we were 3032. Our destination airport in Nantucket is going to be 3026. We're also, let's take a better look at our approach chart here. If I click on this, we can see where we are on the map. Here we go. So we're approaching the VOR. We're going to want to make sure that we set our next altitude at 2,300 feet. As you can see on the chart, this is the minimum altitude stated for this low altitude airway and approach. And in this case, we're only flying via 3,500 feet. So we'll start to decrease our altitude. So when we hit this waypoint, we're at the 2,300 feet. And then we will set our next intercept at 1,700 feet, which will be at Craig. So we want to be, by the time we're at Craig, at 1,700 feet, so we capture the ILS appropriately. Well, let's set everything up now. Altimeter we'll set for our target airport, so we don't have to go back to that. I will check it behind the scenes, but for now, we'll set it to 3026. We'll set our target altitude to 2,300 feet. At this point, I am comfortable activating the approach. We're close enough to the VOR. So we've already got that lined up. I do that all the time intentionally. Activate approach. Approach is active. Now let's go. I descend using vertical speed. Set our descent for a very comfortable 500 feet per minute. And I'll just throttle back a tad. This way we don't overspeed. And 500 feet per minute is a very comfortable descent rate for passengers on board, especially those who are a little nervous about being in a small aircraft. What you can see on the G1000 is our altitude is represented at what I set the target for. So I'm not really off. It will be in the box when I reach an altitude of 2,300 feet. Here comes our turn for the beginning of our approach to ILS runway 6. Beautiful sunset setting up here on the east coast of the U.S. Active Sky just does a phenomenal job with the weather. There's not much weather here today, but it is a little hazy, and the haze is represented perfectly in active sky. Okay, reached our target altitude. I'll go back up to 85% engine power. Take a quick peek, make sure our fuel flow has remained accurate. Again, if you forgot or would like to see it again, we bring up where we should be, 85%, 11.4. So let's lean this out just a little bit more. Good. Don't worry that this is dropped. From I have read in the Cirrus manuals, RPM first, then your fuel flow. Then leave it alone. And you can see what I'm getting on my frame rate is tremendous for a flight simulator. Most people struggle to get to 30 or 35 frames per second. Admittedly, in this condition, there's not a lot of weather, not a lot of clouds. That will definitely bring your frame rate down. But even with the most active, cloudy, layered precipitation, with my current system, I do not typically drop below 50 frames per second, even with some of the Orbix overlaid scenery. So absolutely, your computer system matters when it comes to a realistic flight simulating experience. The controls, same as I use for the VisionJet, because it's a very Cirrus configuration. I use the CH USB Throttle Pro for my throttle, and I use a CH Flight Stick Pro USB for the joystick configuration. Rudder pedals are the Logitech G rudder pedals, and I think they're fantastic. You know, a lot of folks complain about, you know, it's plastic, it's a flight simulator. It just doesn't make sense to me to pay all that money yet anyway for the higher end, over $1,000 for high-end rudder pedals, and for the yoke configuration, I also use the Logitech G yoke system and throttle quadrant. There's where I would be more apt to spend some money. Some of the newer yoke systems out there are a lot more realistic, albeit a lot more expensive. And because of Microsoft Flight Simulator's launch, not available in stores or online. And if they are, you will see ridiculous price gouging by everybody. You know, it's somewhat disappointing to see, but not unexpected. That will level off as demand starts to wane, or production ramps up. I'm sure the pandemic will be also an excuse why the pricing is so high, limited manufacturing, difficulty in shipping, things along those lines. But we'll reevaluate yoke and throttle quadrant for the high wing aircraft that I sometimes fly. Again, partial to the Cessna models. There's a wonderful 152 model available for download. I have a quick video tour of that online. I also have the 172 as well as a Cessna Stationair and 182 model that I like to fly in. But right now, for me, as stated 100 times before, I'm everything Cirrus. If there was an opportunity for me to purchase an aircraft and start training again in real world aircraft, I would certainly go with the Cirrus model. They're unbelievably well made, very safe aircraft. It's a community within itself, and that's what I would do. Probably go over right by Republic Airport, which is not far from my house. Nassau Flyers, over the recent past years, has done a significant upgrade to their program. They used to be high wing, a lot of Cessnas. I actually did, when I was deciding on a flight school, a couple of flights with them in 152 and 172 aircraft, and ultimately flew in a 172 SP, which was a fuel-injected 172. Although I wanted to fly the 152, because if I was ever going to own anything, it probably would not have been much more than a used Cessna 152. Anybody has the winning lottery numbers out there, feel free to send them my way, because I would be quickly reaching out to Cirrus Aircraft for an upgrade. All right, stop talking. Let's set our next altitude target, 1,700 feet. Vertical speed. Gonna throttle back a little bit. You can see we've changed over to our ILS approach on nav 1. We have our runway in sight. Target altitude for the ILS will come into play appropriately here. If I stayed high, I could have intercepted, but if you follow the Navigraph charts to the letter, we really want to intercept Craig 1,700 feet, which is right about here. And I typically try to follow it by the Navigraph charts. And as soon as we capture that, we will activate our approach on the autopilot. We're also going to start to slow the aircraft down a little bit. And when I begin my final descent, we're going to bring our mixture to full rich. That's just to give you full power should you have to do a go around. If you leave this leaned out, for fuel flow purposes, you'll find yourself with a little bit less power. Gonna just keep this about the margin, so once we start descending, I'll deploy first stage of flaps for landing. And we're going to activate our approach at this point. We see our capture of the ILS. Approach is right there. And once we touch down, you will certainly see my rustiness with differential braking and steering. As predicted, we're going to have a crosswind, a little bit out of the north, 13 knots. We'll just come in a little bit faster than normal. Okay, we're descending, so I'm going to actually pull that throttle back, get us set up for our first stage of flaps. And we get to the white line. That's where we're safe to go first stage. Notice the flap noise, the buffeting. That is all XP realistic. I'm going to throttle up a little bit. Come down between 85 and 90 knots. We are certainly crabbing to the runway at this point. Mixture is full rich at this point, and you can tell that by my fuel flow has gone up to 13.2 from where it was to 11.1. Going to stay at 90 knots for a while. About 2 miles out. And let's get our last stage of flaps in. Throttle up a little bit so we don't bleed off too much airspeed. Let's take off our headset.
500 minimums.
And we'll take our autopilot off and try to fly it in the rest of the way. Crosswind and all. Autopilot's off. There's that crosswind. Good descent, good airspeed. Definitely getting pushed around. Let's line her up. There you go. Real windy when we get down here. Good. All right, we're down. We go back to differential braking now for steering. just a little bit. Clean up the aircraft. Let's bring up our flaps. And we'll turn off our strobes. We're off the runway. Be polite, not blind everybody. This is Orbix, Nantucket. We've been here before. Just a great scenery package from Orbix. Aircraft on the field. Again, global traffic.
Sorry, I don't know the answer to this one, but I'm learning.
Okay, wonderful. Windows jumps in. Sorry about that, folks. That was interesting. Haven't seen that before. We'll do a little slow tour of the Orbix scenery. At Nantucket. Tapping the brakes ever so slightly. And stop. Okay, throttle back. Parking brake is on. Off the pedals. And as typical, I like to clean up my G1000. Go to flight plan, go to menu, delete the flight plan. Torpedo off, landing lights off. Mission off. Nav off. Avionics. Alternators. Battery. And in this case, we will turn on our ground equipment, chocks, tie down, pitot cover, inlet cover. Got pretty dark in here. And it is sunset at Nantucket. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you soon. And again, promise we'll get a VATSIM flight in short order, probably with the Vision Jet. A little bit more fun, and if I fly into an airport where there's more jet traffic, the Vision Jet will certainly be able to keep up. There's not a lot at VATSIM in the general aviation airports, although you will find them occasionally. Um, and the folks at VATSIM are just awesome. Air traffic control is extremely realistic. Um, all types of personalities, and you will definitely see that in the busyness of the airport you're flying into. The busier the airport, the more experienced the VATSIM air traffic controller is, and the better you better be at speaking to them. It's not their fault if they're short and fast. It's because they're managing a lot in that airspace, and it is strictly voluntary in the VATSIM world, um, and they certainly know their stuff. So thank you to TorqueSim. This was a fully paid for aircraft. I am not receiving any monetary reimbursement for my evaluations of Orbix, Global Traffic, um, XP Realistic, Navigraph, CH products, etc. I am just giving my um, fair, experienced input on everything I speak about here. I'm too much of a rookie at doing this for anybody to want to give me any reimbursement, as you could tell by some of the videoing that could use a little editing. But I want to keep it real for you folks. If you have any questions or comments, please um, put them in the comments section. Just be kind. Relatively new to this and have never been very confident in doing videos on YouTube, although I've been flying Flight Simulator since the very first DOS version of flight simulation, um, and really enjoy it. A great way to spend a pandemic, flying in a community of folks that are, in some cases, real world pilots, real world training pilots, um, and you could learn so much from them. Um, don't be afraid to ask. And if you go on VATSIM, uh, read before you go online. There is definitely a level of experience that you should have before you try to jump into aircraft at VATSIM with air traffic control. Um, but once you do get comfortable with the simulator, flying your aircraft, don't be afraid to ask folks when you get online. There's a lot of forums, a lot of clubs available at VATSIM, and I highly recommend that you find one that you like um, and take advantage of it. It's a great hobby, and we'll see you really soon. Have a great night. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.